Today, we are going to talk about the number one mistake that 90% of people make when they first start intermittent fasting. And it's a big mistake because if you do this, not only will you not get results, but you'll feel like crap while you're doing it and you'll probably quit. So let's talk about what it is. First of all, welcome to this channel. This is the channel for those of you that are looking to get rid of stubborn body fat, gain lean muscle mass, and live an overall healthier lifestyle. So if that sounds good to you, definitely stay tuned for more videos just like this. Now, intermittent fasting has grown exponentially in popularity over the last few years, and for good reason. It is a great tool to use whether you're trying to lose weight, improve insulin sensitivity, or even extend the lifespan. There are so many benefits associated with regular practice of intermittent fasting, but the problem is that most people don't do it right, especially at first. And there's one thing that 90% of people do that really causes them to suffer while they are doing this and usually ends up quitting. And that thing is eating too clean during your eating window. Let me explain what I mean by that. First, let's talk about the basic premise behind intermittent fasting. The whole idea is to cycle between periods of eating and fasting. So you would have a certain amount of time where you're allowed to eat, and then outside of that time frame, you're not. That's it. That's all there is to it. But as far as what you can eat during your eating window, well, that's where most people go wrong. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I am absolutely not anti-clean eating. In fact, I think that in general, eating whole foods is optimal for your health, and that highly processed foods should be avoided as much as possible. However, when it comes to getting results from intermittent fasting, sometimes you need to break that clean eating rule a little bit. Let me explain. You see, with a diet like keto, for example, you might be required to eat very clean 24/7. Otherwise, you won't get the desired effects. For example, if you're doing keto and you're eating tons of fatty meat, full-fat dairy and eggs, you're probably going to be able to hit ketosis fairly easily. However, if you start adding in tons of fruits and vegetables, you're going to raise your carbs and potentially knock yourself out of ketosis. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but if your goal is to burn fat and get into ketosis, then eating clean all day every day is important. But with intermittent fasting, it's a whole different ballgame because the whole point of intermittent fasting isn't necessarily tied to the quality of food you're eating, but rather the frequency that you're eating. So, yes, I generally recommend eating whole foods as much as possible. But if your main goal is to burn fat with intermittent fasting, then you need to focus on getting into a caloric deficit, which doesn't always require you to eat super clean. For example, if you normally have 4 meals a day, but you decide to switch to intermittent fasting, you can still eat the same 4 meals, just spread out through longer periods of time. For example, you could eat breakfast at 8 a.m., lunch at noon, snack at 4 p.m., and then have dinner at 8 p.m., which is pretty much the same amount of time between each meal. If you were to add all those meals up, you're probably going to be at around 2,000 calories. But now, let's say instead of eating breakfast, you fast until 12 p.m., then you have lunch, then you fast until 6 p.m., and then you have dinner. You just took 2 meals and stretched them further apart, and you just created a 16-hour fast. Now, if you keep your meals relatively clean, you can still maintain a 2,000-calorie diet, but you've now added an extra 16 hours of fasting onto your day, which is great for burning fat. Now, ideally, you would want to lower the calories further than 2,000 to burn more fat. But my point is that you don't have to drastically change your eating habits right away. For example, if you're going to go out and have pizza one night, then plan on fasting the next day. Or maybe you have a bunch of snacks one day, then don't eat anything the next morning. By doing this, you're still allowing your body to spend long periods of time without food, which is the ultimate goal. Another way to do this is by focusing on making your eating window shorter instead of focusing on keeping your calories low. This is actually what I recommend to most of my clients. They set their eating window for 6 hours, and then they're allowed to eat whatever they want during that 6-hour window. That means pizza, donuts, cookies, ice cream, Snickers, crackers, cereal, bread, peanut butter, etc. whatever they want. Now, of course, I always try to convince them to eat slightly better than that. But if they tell me they can only stick to that plan for a week, then I'll tell them to go ahead and eat whatever they want. The main goal is to get into the habit of fasting, and then you can worry about cleaning up the diet later on. So, how does this work? Well, when you eat, you spike insulin. Insulin is the hormone that's responsible for storing energy as fat. So the more that you spike insulin, the more likely you are to gain body fat. By limiting your eating to a 6-hour window, you're giving your body plenty of time to burn off all the sugar that you ate. And since you're not eating for the other 18 hours of the day, you're going to spend a lot of that time in a fasted state, which is excellent for burning fat. In fact, you can actually burn a lot more fat this way compared to traditional dieting, because intermittent fasting triggers something called the afterburn effect, which makes you burn more calories throughout the rest of the day. On top of that, you also get the benefits of autophagy, which is when your body cleans out damaged cells and proteins and recycles them for new cell growth. Autophagy is also excellent for longevity and improving brain function. But here's the problem. If you try to make your eating window too short, or you try to eat too clean during that eating window, you're not going to get the benefits of fat loss and autophagy. And it's going to be almost impossible to maintain. So it's important to understand that when it comes to intermittent fasting, you need to take a balanced approach. If you're just starting out, allow yourself to eat whatever you want during your eating window and focus on making your eating window smaller. Over time, you can lengthen your fast and shorten your eating window, and you can also start to clean up your diet a little bit. But if you try to do it all at once, you're going to set yourself up for failure. Now, I want to make it clear that you can burn fat eating whatever you want, 24/7. But it will be much harder to burn fat with intermittent fasting. So if you want to get the maximum benefits, follow what I just said. Start with a 6-hour eating window and then slowly progress from there. Now, aside from the type of food you eat, you also need to pay attention to the timing of your meals. If you have a very busy schedule, it's much easier to simply have 3 large meals throughout the day rather than 2 medium or small meals. And that's totally fine. So if you have 3 meals a day, you could do a 12-hour fast. For example, you could have breakfast at 8 a.m., then lunch at 1 p.m., and then dinner at 6 p.m. In this case, you're fasting for 12 hours, which is enough to see some pretty decent results. So again, my point is that you don't have to completely change your eating habits overnight to reap the benefits of intermittent fasting. Give yourself time to adjust, and don't forget that this is a long-term lifestyle change that you're making. So it needs to be something that's sustainable. I hope this video helps. And if you'd like any extra help with setting up your ideal intermittent fasting plan, and as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more great evidence-based nutrition information, and you can also check out more of my content by clicking one of the links in the description below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys soon.